Hey folks, video 2 in this segment. I just wanted to mention when I start out on these things, I usually park the vehicle out, and I do not almost ever use a torch or a plasma cutter. A lot of the sites want you to believe, or webs, whatever you want to call them, YouTube videos and that want you to believe that working on this stuff, if you're going to build a street rod, you need an expensive plasma cutter and an expensive welder and a torch set and all this fancy equipment. Literally, part of why I want to do this segment or this video on this street rod is to prove that it can be built with just garage tools. Now, obviously, I'm a professional fabricator. I've got thousands of dollars worth of equipment. I've got high-end welders. I do have a really nice plasma cutter available. In fact, I've got 2 CNC plasma cutter tables that I never use either, because it's just easier for our company to outsource stuff to another company for timeline wise, because right now we're not doing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of plasma work where I could justify having a $60,000 programmer on hand to run my CNC machinery. I just outsource what we need for snowplow season because it's cheaper and it doesn't take up as much space, and I don't have to have a laborer designated to that. But anyways, one of the things that I wanted to feature was the fact that keep everything. I still have the cutoff section of this frame sitting out on the trailer right now because I may need segments or pieces from it. I kept all of this junk, even though those leaf springs are broken on the end. I kept them, these are the spindles that came off of it. And as you see, this one over here, the rotor is destroyed. The back ring came off the rotor. But if you throw this stuff away before you can afford to get replacement for it, your project is going to stall because now you can't put wheels on it and roll it out of the way. This may not be what you want to use in the long run, but it at least gives you something to stage off of. So, like my wheels here, these are the original steel wheels. We're going to clean up those ones because I want to do steelies on this. But you'll see these two have the slots damaged, or the holes are slotted because they were moving around on the studs. If I threw those away, now I've only got 4 wheels to put on this thing. So how do I set my offsets for my wheel wells? I can still stick junk tires on these, put them onto the axle, set up my 4 lengths for the rear axle, and get all my clearances, and replace the wheels later. So don't throw away all of your parts until you know that you've got replacements on hand. Same is true, let's say right now I've got these steering linkage parts that came off of this one. Well, the tie rod end is broken, but for staging this or for moving it in and out of the shop or whatever, I can still bolt these parts back on, weld the broken tie rod to the end of that one. Is it road safe? No. But will it get it in and out of the garage and let me move it around while I'm doing some of the other mechanical work or doing body work? Yes. So that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make, is the first thing they do is they strip the vehicle down and throw away all the old stuff because, I'm going to put Wilwood brakes on it and I'm going to put 20-inch wheels and I'm going to put all this stuff. And now you've got a car that is abandoned on the jack stands because they physically have no way to move it. And now they can't afford their $5,000 braking system or their 4-wheel disc brakes or whatever it is they're going to go with. Well, if you had at least kept the factory parts, you could have bolted it back together and at least moved it around. Or maybe even fired it up and drove it up to the gas station and back, which will revitalize your excitement about doing it. That's one of the problems when you're building street rods, is you will hit a point that it becomes overwhelming. And so, you've got your frame all finished up, and let's say you had your frame powder coated, and you put brand new body mounts on it, and you put brand new interior in it, and you bought a crate motor for $9,000 and stuck it in it. But now you can't afford those $5,000 Wilwood brakes, and you fall into a depression, and the car never gets touched again. If you had the factory parts in an afternoon, you and a case of beer could have put the thing together and at least taken it for a drive. So keep all of your parts until you have the replacements on hand. But like I say, also, I don't use torches unless absolutely necessary. I almost never use the plasma cutter because the main thing they're good at is lighting vehicles on fire. You know, somebody grabs a torch, especially somebody that doesn't do this stuff every day. Somebody grabs a torch or a plasma cutter and decides they're going to cut through the firewall or through the quarter panel or something else like that, and now they lit the interior of the car on fire. Or they hit a gas line and now they've got a real problem because they just burned their garage down. So what I use is 4-inch grinders and a Sawzall if necessary, if you've got a corner that you can't get into. So I use the 4-inch grinders with the cutoff wheels and flap discs, hard wheels. For cleaning stuff up, I use these wire brushes. 80% of my deconstruction of a vehicle or a frame like this is done with a 4-inch grinder and hand ratchets and sockets and some wrenches. So literally, you could buy everything you need to build a street rod at Harbor Freight for probably $300 to $500. And then you have it for life. You don't need an expensive plasma cutter, an expensive torch, and all this other stuff. Obviously, some things are going to fight you a bit more than a hand ratchet is going to do for you, like the bolts on the lower A-frames and upper A-frames are often putting up a fight. So you may need a $150 air impact, but you sure don't need the $600 Milwaukee cordless impact to do that. Do I have one? Yes, because I do this stuff every day and I need to be able to be quick at it. Do you need one? No, it's a novelty. Put that $600 into something else and, you know, if nothing else, a piece of pipe on your ratchet if you've got a good quality ratchet, or a breaker bar that's intended for that, and you can get the bolts loose. But that's kind of my little bit of a preaching moment on it. I want everybody to be able to build street rods, and sometimes this culture of you have to have the newest, best toys in order to make it viable is just kind of a waste of effort. It scares people off. I seriously think anybody can do this stuff if you take the time and you're careful about it. But a little bit on process here, like I say, save everything, but on the other side of it, when it comes to the frame, I always cut a little beyond, so like in this case, I cut 6 inches longer than I needed. Then I cut the body mounts off of this. So originally this was the core support mount there. And then it had the cab cradle here that you'll see in the earlier video. But then I mark it out and start, once I've got it on a squaring table or squaring block of some sort, then I mark it out and I start cutting back to the minimum of what I need. Now, before I touched anything on this to even try and save this, the first thing I did was check for rust. And obviously this was in 1991. The body was rotted out when we got it 20 years ago. We used it for 8 years and then it sat in the field for 15 days. So I've got a very, very specific way that I check for rust. It's right there. It's a 1/2 pound or a couple ounce hammer. You don't need to wail on this thing with a big friggin' hammer that weighs 8 pounds or any of that, because obviously with it being an 1/8 inch frame, you're gonna dent something. But I literally, when I buy trucks, I do this too. I ask the client, do they mind if or the seller, if they mind if I hit the frame of the truck with a hammer? And you're gonna get a lot of flaking rust off of a truck that's 30 years old, especially on these old Chevys or Fords or Dodge. The frames rotted pretty well right when they left the factory. But all you do is take this hammer and hit the frame. And if you find a soft spot, you switch to the ball and hit until you punch through if it's going to. Now, I've had a couple of trucks, in fact, one of the 3/4 tons that I've got sitting out there, and a 1/2 ton, come to think of it, 98 1/2 ton Chevy. I took the little hammer like that and by the time I was done hammering on the frame of the vehicle, there was 3 inches of rust laying on the ground. And I still bought the truck because there were no punch holes going through. These things are always going to have a bit of delamination and a bit of flaking. It's a 30 or 40-year-old truck. But if there's no big gaping holes in the frame, it's still structural. And in that case, I needed something to get through one winter because the engine was out in my other truck. So I was buying an $1,100 truck to get through the winter. I needed 4-wheel drive, and it had it. And we're on year 3 with that truck. So I needed it to last 1 year. We've gotten 3 years out of it, and it's still structural. So don't be afraid of rust. Up here in the Midwest, everything rusts. And like I say, even 2 years right out of the factory, they'll have flaking and they'll have pocking on them. In this particular case, I knew the truck very well. We had done some rust repair on the frame before, but the only rust on this front cradle, other than some pocking, which you can see here, it's got a little bit of a rough texture, but is this hole here and that hole there. Now, for some of you homeowners, you might be saying that, or home mechanics, I should say, you might be saying, well, that frame has some rust on it. You're going to actually continue to build something that you expect to last 20 years. I'm a welding shop. I can cut that little section of metal out, cut a new piece to the right shape, weld it in, and it'll be good as new. So all the rest of this rust on here is superficial. It did not remove enough structure from the steel that I'm worried about it for what I'm doing with this. Obviously, if the truck was a 1-ton and we were pulling a 15,000-pound trailer with it and loading the thing up with heavy steel, and if it could put up with that, it can put up with being a 300-horse street rod that's being built for fun, not for drag racing. Once I've gotten rid of all the junk off of it that you don't need, or in this case, all of the suspension parts and all of the body mounts and all that, then I start cutting it back to the shape that I want. In this case, I am going with a 4-inch box tube frame, and I'm going high with the frame, much like you would see on a T-bucket that's running Z-bar suspension. So in this case, I'm going to the top of the frame with this, and then I'll do a Z bend in the frame right ahead of the cowl to drop it another 4 inches or 5 inches, about 3 feet back, and that'll allow me to tuck my headers underneath the frame to get out where you would see running boards on most cars, so I can do side pipe exhaust on this one without it dragging on the ground. The side pipe exhaust will be higher than my A-arms and protected. So that's one of the things that annoys me when you see a full-on custom build and then the headers are dragging on the ground because they didn't plan for them to clear anything. It's goofy if you're going to do that much fabrication that you didn't think of how your exhaust is going to come out or how your brakes are going to sit. I kind of plan everything out in my head, and most of these things I've got 3 or 4 street rods in mind when I'm working on this, and I come up with new ideas for the next one before I ever finish the first. But anyways, getting a little long-winded, I started to wire brush this out using this cup brush. Now these brushes are about $4 on Amazon. I've run $19 brushes and I've run $4 brushes. Go with the $4 ones. Just wear a leather welding vest or thick shirt of some sort, because if you're not used to getting poked by little bristles, these things do shed a few more bristles than the $19 ones. Same is true for the 040s. I run decent quality 040s and 075 discs. Now your 040 discs will cut faster, that's the thickness of it, but they tend to explode easier. If you're not a pro, the fast cut and the fact that they explode easy may actually be a bit terrifying to you. These are the ones that you always see with people stuck in their glasses and chunks out of their arm and that. They're a little bit more fragile if they're the 040. But if you buy a good quality one, don't buy the Harbor Freight ones on this particular thing. Run a Harbor Freight grinder all day, every day. I'm tired of paying $85 for these Milwaukee grinders and having them be junk. Normally I don't speak bad about a product, but these grinders cost $85 and I burned up 10 of them this year. I have a Milwaukee 4.5-inch grinder that's 28 years old and still use it daily. And these things aren't even a year old, are junk, and they're $85. But I bought some $30 Harbor Freight ones, and they're better than these things. And I've got some Metabos that are 27 years old as well. And I've got some newer Metabos, and they're junk as well, the W11s. These companies are riding on their name. So the grinder, go ahead and buy the Harbor Freight. The wire wheels, buy Harbor Freight or Amazon. For the cutoff wheels, buy them on Amazon or whatever, eBay, whatever, but get a decent quality one. Spend about $3-4 on those, because having the good quality is well worth it. You see this one starting to fray on the edge because I got caught in the corner. This is a 075 disc, and you can just about flex this thing to a 30-degree angle and it'll put up with the fight. So the thicker 075 discs last a bit longer. On your hard wheels, go ahead and run the cheap ones. On the soft wheels, or flat discs as they're called now, I run cheap ones. These are just Amazon, 40 cents a piece. I buy them 60 at a time or whatever. But that's pretty well what you need. Is I like to have two grinders, one with the grinder or cutoff wheel and one with the wire brush, and I just kind of cut and clean as I go. But yeah, get rid of the junk you don't need, then wire brush it down. And then on this particular one, I'm either going to acid bath it or sandblast the inside of it, and then I will OSPO this with rust protectant. But I'm also going to weld in some webbing and structure and repair that rust there, because this is going to be a higher end build. This is not the little $8,000 street rod I'm hoping to target for a $40,000 to $60,000 street rod with this one. So normally I would love to say, start with a Southern truck and blah, blah, blah. I'm not paying $2,000 just for a frame so that I can go and cut it up. And this one has some sentimental value to us because it's been in the family so long. It was one of our first work trucks for the business. And so that little bit of rust doesn't scare me at all. I'll go ahead and repair that, and this thing will be beautiful when it grows up and becomes what it's going to be. But long ranting video, but very associated to what we're doing here. Like I say, I want you guys to see that a garage mechanic can build a cool rod, and that in the modern era, you can still build some neat street rods with what's out there available for parts at the junkyards. Thank you for watching.